Right, cool. So I'm going to introduce, this is Flutter Kenya Wednesday vibes. What we normally do is we just have like a particular topic, we discuss about it, tell us what you've been working on in regards to that particular topic, how you're able to mitigate through it, what challenges you're facing, and yeah, we literally learn together. So these Wednesday vibes don't have like a particular speaker because everybody is a speaker. That's why I was encouraging like you guys to introduce yourselves so that we learn together from each other. Okay, so and the topic for today is widget life cycle. So anyone with an idea what a widget life cycle is or what we are gonna talk about? Anyone? Yes, no, no. Okay, maybe I should just kick it off. All right, so everything in Flutter we all know is a widget, right? And I think we have like two major widgets in Flutter, that is, or rather two types, that is stateful and stateless widget, right? So what is a stateful widget and what is a stateless widget? Does anyone want to answer that? Guys from Geni? No? Yes? Okay, guys, let's make this fun and interactive, or I'll be just calling you out. Anyway, so a stateless, we'll start with a stateless widget first. A stateless widget is a type of widget whose state does not change at all. For example, you're working on, let me try presenting my screen. I hope you're able to view like disposed view. That's like maybe a topic, right? So this is an example of a stateless widget. This view here doesn't change because we've set it in a way that it doesn't necessarily have to keep changing or updating its state. If we are viewing it as a title, in a title point of view, or let's say we have that plus button that's normally down here, like whenever you're pressing, that's like a stateless widget because it doesn't necessarily have to change, right? So that's like an example of a stateless widget. Examples of those are like buttons, icons, titles, etc. And then it returns a widget by overriding the build method. And it is used when the UI relies on the information inside the object itself. For example, here, whatever this widget relies on, this what text bit of it. I hope I'm explaining it well. And moving on, we have a stateful widget. So what is a stateful widget? What does this mean? It means that the state of this widget is dynamic, which means it changes. Like it doesn't have to like remain the same. It has to like change. And it overrides the create state and returns a state. This means that whenever you're interacting with a stateful widget, you expect to like view different things. For example, you're filling in a form. So you expect like whenever you're typing into the form field, like things have to change or it has to update. So this is what it means by a stateful widget. And also its state can change in real time. Like whenever you refresh maybe a page, you expect like to view different things from what was in that page previously. So this is what it means by its states can change in real time. And this is the widget that most of the life cycle happens. So this is where we are going to like focus more on this topic of life cycles, of widget life cycles rather. Okay, is there any question from there? No. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay, cool. Ask.
So within the explanation of what a stateless widget is, there's a statement you said, and I quote, in the case of a stateless widget, the UI relies on the information inside the object. Could you please expound? I'm not sure I understand that.
Okay, the UI relies, sorry.
The UI relies on the information inside the object.
Oh, relies on the information inside the object itself. Does anyone wish to like explain this? Maybe let me ask who. Mila, are you at a position to like expound on that?
Hello.
Yep.
Sorry. Do you mind repeating the question? I missed it, but I can.
So we are talking about the stateless widget, and I mentioned that the stateless widget basically means that it doesn't change, the state of it does not change. And then I say that it's used when the UI relies on the information inside the object itself. And then I give an example of this particular screen here, like this post view, which is basically a title, right? So it says that it is used when the UI relies on the information inside the object itself. So Carl wanted to like know more in depth of that.
So ideally, it is just to expound on what a stateless widget is. Yeah. All right. So just as you've said, it is a widget which ideally isn't expected to change that much, because I think I heard when you said there are two kinds of widget: stateful and stateless. So stateless will ideally not be changing, but a stateful will be changing based on user interaction. So in this case, the title is ideally meant to be static. So that is why we'll use a stateless widget, because the information that is meant to be static, and is not meant to be changed based on say user interaction, or say dimensions changing, and things like that.
Yes, thank you. Carl, was that clear enough for you?
Yeah, in a way that's expounding on the definition of what a stateless widget is. But I think my question is a bit more specific on the statement that I just quoted. But it's okay. I can just, I don't know, I'll try to figure it out.
Okay, well, we are trying to figure it out, all of us together, because ideally we are all learning. But
Okay. Do you mind requoting the statement? I must have missed it. Sorry, I was a bit distracted.
Okay, so the statement is, and this is a statement that the host, I can't tell what your name is from this. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Mila.
No, not the
me,
host.
Candy.
Oh, Candy. Yeah. Okay, now I remember. I was trying to read from my screen. So
Okay.
Candy, when Candy was explaining what a stateless widget is, there's a statement within all the things she was mentioning, and the statement was a stateless widget is, okay, let me just paraphrase because I can't remember it word by word, but stateless widget is used preferably when the user interface relies on the information inside the object itself. That's right, Candy, right? Yeah, that statement, out of everything she said, that is what I didn't understand. I don't know what that means. So I was just asking for anyone who maybe understood that to expound or maybe paraphrase.
Let me chip in a bit.
Okay.
So, okay, take take a stateful widget as a screen, as a screen on its own. Okay, I stand to be corrected on this. So take a stateful widget as a screen, then the stateless widgets as the widgets which build up the screen, like the text buttons and all. So a state on its own could be probably, okay, taking an example of a login screen. So when maybe you have when you interact with the UI, you like change states within maybe those text fields, right? Like the username, passwords. The way you add data within it. That's the state of that UI changing. Then the object itself now is, okay, I don't know if you've dealt with things like providers and all. The object itself will be like will deal with the state of that whole, you know. I don't know hapo imechanganya, but I don't know if till the if you've understood, like a stateful widget will be like a screen, then the stateless widgets will be now the button text fields, then the object itself will now be like the variables. Let's take like a class actually. Now all those variables within it, login state, probably the username, tag controllers and things like those. That's what I will explain as from an example point of view.
Hey, Candy.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just like probably to chime in and probably just remove the confusion, because as I've seen, probably there's a notion that a stateful widget has to be like the whole screen. But in essence, actually, each and every widget as an individual can be a stateful widget. And they can be like sort of called inside a stateless widget. But in essence, what it means to be a stateful widget means that the widget itself depends on either like some objects or some variables that might change within the build time. So with that, you have to understand like the moment the screen is rendered, that is when the build function is called. And now in a stateless widget situation, which can even like just be a single button and the whole screen is stateful, there is no dependency. It doesn't depend on any outside factors for it to rebuild in case those factors change within that life cycle of it has been built. But for the case of a stateful widget, that widget will be rebuilt. Probably it won't be visible to your eyes or anything like that, but it depends on something. And when that factor variable object changes, whether new data comes in, that object will have to be rendered, that widget will have to be rendered again on the screen with respect to the new data that has either entered. Yeah.
Great. I think that both of you have explained it properly. I don't know if Carl, you're satisfied with that. Oh, and we also have, sorry. Oh, we have another insight from Kevin. Brief explanation from my view is, for a stateless widget, external data does not sway how it operates. It only works with the internal data it ships in. For stateful widget, its state changes depending on external data. Is that like clear enough yet? Or maybe from Carl?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just like before, most people are really expounding what a stateful and stateless widgets are. Just the definition. I haven't had anyone explaining what the state. There's this statement that is being said about the UI relying on the information inside the object itself, and it pertains to a stateless widget. And the reason I'm dwelling on this is because isn't it not true that a stateful widget also has like the UI, the user interface still relies on the information within a stateful widget as well? I mean, it applies to both a stateful and a stateless widget, that particular statement. That was my view, and that's why I asked that question. But I don't want to take up too much time here. And I know, like you mentioned before, we all want to know and understand, but then we can't dwell on this particular issue for the entire period, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So though I've got quite a bit of insight from everyone who has chimed in, and thank you for that.
All right, cool. Okay, cool. We can always, like, expound more, or rather have more insights still from people. You can drop in your insights also on the chat if you can't open your mic. So we jump straight to the init state. So since we said that most of the life cycles happens in the stateful widget, so there are a couple of other life cycles in this particular widget, and some of them are from create state, init state, did change dependency. We also have the did update and did update, deactivate, and dispose. These are some of the views that I found, and I would like to speak more on each probably. Sorry. More on each. So from the create states, from how I understand the create state is anytime you're also kindly touch on post frame callback. Oh, I haven't heard on post frame callback, but if somebody knows much about it, they can expand. So from the create state, this is automatically created when creating a stateful widget. Like for example, when you're, let me try to present my screen again. Oh, also I prepared an example code base, so when you have time you can check it out from our repository. Let's see, for example, that. So here we are trying a stateful widget, right? So you can see this particular bit, it gets created automatically whenever you're creating a stateful widget. Does anyone know more about the create state? I just know that it gets created automatically whenever you're creating this particular stateful widget rather. We can also read from here. So it creates them. The framework can call this method multiple times over the lifetime. Anyway, so that's what I know about it, but let's move to the init states. Init state. So this is an example of an init state. So this is it's called before the build method. This is what we mean by the build method, I suppose. You can do any kind of initialization needed for this widget. By initialization here, we mean if you want to initialize something like an animation controller, I suppose. This is called once and only, and it must be called by super.init state. So you implement your methods right after the super.init state. Does anyone want to expound more on this init state? Guys, this is an open forum for all of us. Oh, we have Sam here. Sam, would you want to expound more on init state, this particular view? No?
Hi, Candy.
What's up?
Isaac here. So
Mhm.
I joined a bit late, but I think Sam is preparing. I can touch a little something on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so basically, I'm sure even if we have non-beginners in the house, every application you build, especially front-end application, with your favorite framework, be it Vue, be it Angular, React, and in this case, Flutter. So we all deal with variables, we all deal with logics that we want to initialize immediately after loading a screen. So in simple term, the init state is where we do that. And one thing to mention, very important, is that it's only available for the stateful widgets. And I think by the time I was joining, you guys were discussing about stateless and stateful widgets. And I don't know whether it came up, but we all know that stateful widget, the widgets where you can manage state inside, or the state is supposed to change. So that's why now the init state function comes in. From its name, by simple terms, it's where you initialize the state of the app. Let's say you have some variables that you want to assign some values to them immediately after that frame, or rather that screen has loaded. That's where you do that. I would like to give an example. Let's say you are loading a user's list screen. And of course, you've defined your user interface, but then you still need to fetch your users. In some other technical terms, we call them life cycle hooks. So a life cycle hooks is now those stages when the application, or rather those stages that happen before the full user interface is loaded. And for a Flutter user interface, you will need somewhere where you want to call your backend API, so that now that user list can be loaded. So the init state is a place where you would do it. So just to summarize what I've said, the init state is a function available to stateful widget where you can initialize, or rather assign the initial values, or rather do some other functionalities like backend calls immediately after your UI has been rendered to the screen. I don't know whether that's clear.
Yes, thank you so much, Isaac, for that. I think that's a very perfect explanation. Like you've said, this is where you get to initialize your your implementation. For example, here I am using like an animation controller, so I had to like initialize it, and then yeah, and had to like initialize it here first so that I'm able to use it within the init state. So I hope that's clear. If anyone has like a question, then we could like clear it up. Otherwise, does anyone have anything to add on, chip on, before we go to the next? Yes, no?
I do.
Okay. Cool.
So there's something Isaac has mentioned that,
Mhm.
from the information I have, I'd just like to clarify, but I stand to be corrected.
Okay.
Sure
It-
thing.
Yeah, you've said that the init state is called once the UI has been rendered, right? Just confirm. I heard you say it,
Sorry?
but I just need to confirm before I proceed. You've said that the init state, this init state method, it's called once the user interface has been rendered. Like immediately the user interface is rendered, it's called.
Well, now that you put it that, I can take it back and put it vaguely, that it can be called, well, it's called as, those process. That's why I introduced the idea of life cycle hooks, So it can be called before the full UI has been rendered. But I just said that to just put the idea that once, what is this name? Do you understand like Flutter rendering? How it works before I continue, maybe? I'm trying to avoid using some deep technical terms. But of course, thank you.
I'll seek clarification whenever you mention something that is not clear. I have a bit of
I understand. I even understand the origin of the question. So what I was trying to say is, so init state is more like a life cycle hook that is called as, let me say, as your UI, or rather as your widgets are being rendered on the screen, okay? So it's something like that, but it's called during the initial stages of UI rendering or the other stack rendering on your screen. I don't want to go deep into the rendering processes because I might feel it's way outside the scope of this talk. But typically I understand where your question comes from. So it's not exactly after the UI has been rendered on the screen, but it's during the process.
Okay, so is this something that runs in parallel with, would you say they run in parallel, or the init state comes before the rendering starts? Because from the knowledge I have gathered over time, the init state, the UI is only rendered when build is called.
Yes.
Right? At that point is when the UI is rendered. By that time, init state had already been called and everything within it has been executed.
Yes.
Right. And that's why it's init state. So all the data that you need to use on your UI should have been initialized within init state if it hadn't been initialized yet, right?
Well, not necessarily all the data. You might have some constant value outside the init state. Yes, but again, I understand.
What I mean is the data that you haven't specified within the stateful widget, right?
That's very true.
Okay, but they could also be asynchronous.
Yes. That's why I mentioned the calling of backend APIs, which definitely is asynchronous, returns a future. So again, that's where now state management come, and hence the statement that the init state is available for stateful widgets. Yes, but what you've said is very true.
I think it's proper to mention that it's best works when you're using something like the late keyword. So like you're basically telling the widget that there's a variable that should be here and there's a value that should be assigned to this variable, but it's going to be late. Yeah, so you initialize it as late, or maybe initialize it as nullable. And then within the init state, you'll call the asynchronous function that will assign a value to that. So that's where I've seen it used.
Thank you for that addition.
Okay.
Guess back to you, Kendi.
Okay, thank you so much, guys, for the chipping in. I believe that was Carl asking, so I hope it was clear, right?
Yes, very clear.
Is this what you mean by adding the late, right? I hope so. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so moving forward, we have the did change dependency according to how I was checking it, it's called immediately after init state. On the first time, the widget is built. Also, this is called when every dependency changes for this particular state. I didn't get much about this from whatever I was looking for. However, I would really love to like hear more on did change dependencies from you guys. Like, what exactly is this did change dependency? Because from definition, they say it's called when every dependency change for this particular state.
Can I touch on this?
Yeah, sure.
There's this thing that happens if you're trying to call init state. And you know how a lot of things in Flutter can be bound to the context. So like you want to does everybody, can I assume that everybody here has experience with Riverpod? Or basically, let's say you have a function. Okay, let's say you have a function, right? And you're calling this function in the init state. And you need to show some, within that function, you need to show something like a toast, right? And a toast, it's something that you have to pass the context. So show it in this context, right? So then the context is basically like the context of that page. So like basically in the build context there, you have the context, right? But if you try to pass that context, that value of that context within the init state, sometimes because the build function has not been called, you may find that that context is not available yet, right? And that's a problem. So what did change dependencies does is it tries to eliminate that, so that you can call whatever you'd be calling in the init state, but you can call it within did change dependencies, and also like pass the context of the function. So what it really does, okay, there's the technical side of it, but what it really does is it just assures you as a developer that the context is available, and I can use that context within whichever function now I'll be calling. So I can just pass the context, because within init state, you're not assured that the context will be available.
Oh, so is this what they mean when they say that it's safe to call the build context that depend on inherited widget of exact type, because this cannot be done from init state. However, it's possible from the did change dependencies.
Yeah, basically within the init state, it's init state will be called when you're initializing your variables, and at the same time, you have the build function being called. So like it's about the time that the widget is being rendered. So you don't have the context, maybe you don't even have the scaffold yet. So so in that state, you don't have the context. And if the function you're about to call requires you to pass the context for it to work, right? And if anybody has worked with Riverpod, they know that if you want to read you want to read maybe a value from a change notifier provider, you need to like do a ref.watch, and a ref will only be available within the build context. So it's a bit more convoluted when you speak of it from that perspective, but the whole idea is that the context is not available within the init state, but it's available within the did change dependencies. And a lot of Flutter functionalities require the context to function properly.
Okay, great. I didn't know that. All right, thank you for explaining it. Yeah, thank you so much for explaining it. I hope the rest were able to grasp and understand it. If not, you always feel free to like ask a question or something. All right, so let's move to the did updates widgets. So this is called when the widget is rebuilt. from this did update, it's a whole lot of process. I guess I hope I'll be able to like explain it properly. So with this did update, you can simulate a call by passing a variable down the widgets. From this example, we have to like convert my app. Remember, when we are building, or rather when you're creating like this, the create app, this my app is normally a stateless widget. So we have to like convert it to a stateful widget, and then we create a method. We create a method where we create a method and a state variable, which will be responsible for updating the state variable, where we want to be able to update the title when it's called. So ideally, we want to like update the title for our application. So how are we going to do this? Oh wait, before I start explaining it, anyone with a context of what did update widget is? Yes, no? All right, let me just continue then. So we have like this view where we've changed to a stateful widget, and then we've created a method and a state variable, which will be responsible for updating the state variable, where we want to be able to update the title when it's called. So here, where did I put that? So this is the title that we're going to be having when we call this method, this state, and after we update, this is like the new title that we want to see. And then we have to like convert this to a string, as it will be reassigned to the set state. This is the set state that's going to be reassigned. So from this title string to this new title is what we want. And then we need to like pass the title variable down to the home page by replacing the initial title. So down here to the home title, this normally, what is normally here? The title is not like this. So we have to like reassign this title here so that we are able to like render the new string, or rather the new title that we want. And then afterwards, we also need to like pass the update title method down the home page so that you can call it below. Is this like a bit clear on what I'm trying to like explain? Anyone, anybody? Okay.
Please repeat your question, Candy.
I wanted to know if it's clear on what I'm trying to like explain on the did update widget. So ideally, what we want to like do on this life cycle is to update the particular. We first had like this title, life cycle example, as our initial title. However, we want to make sure that with this particular life cycle that we are on, we would want to like update the life cycle example to new life cycle example as the new title. So I was trying to like explain like how we are going to like implement that with this particular life cycle state, which is the did updates widget. Yeah. And how are we able to like see the changes that we want to see? on the updated lifecycle. I think that would be possible if we implement like maybe something like a button where somebody is able to like press on it so that the title automatically updates. Or rather, yeah, updates to the next title that we wanted to implement. Ideally, this is like the next life cycle widget, and I'm not quite sure if people understand it, and I would love to like hear your opinion on it, and if anybody has ever tried to like implement such.
Candy, can you kindly repeat that?
So we are on this did update widget, right? This did update widget lifecycle. So what we want to see is we have two types of text of title. Let me try running this. I see if we'll be able to like see what I'm trying to say. We have a title, this life cycle example that we would wish to update to a life cycle example. So yeah, good. So the application is run. So on this did update widget life cycle, you see like this life cycle example, right? We want to see how would we be able to like update this particular title to a new title so that we are able to like see this life cycle and how it's able to go. And we also mentioned like titles ideally are like stateful widgets, so they normally don't change. However, in this context, we want to see, are we able to like change this particular narrative? So we change from life cycle example to new life cycle example. So I wanted to know, like, has anyone used the did update widget life cycle to like change particular text or title or whatever into a new text using the did updates widget lifecycle?
Is it triggered before or after the state update?
Sorry?
The did updates.
It's triggered after.
The idea is to use it to change the state after the fact that the state update has been changed.
Precisely.
Also, you'll trigger the state update from somewhere else and then updates the new state of that after that state update.
So
okay.
The way I implemented is I did this I wrote this button. Where is it? I have this elevated button so that we are able to like see. So we added like a button to the build method, which will be used rather for calling the method that we created, for updating this particular widget. So for example, when I click on the did update widget, it triggers like the method, and then it changes from the life cycle example to new life cycle example. It rather changes the topic. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And can you go back to the elevated button?
Yeah, sure. So here is the elevated button that I triggered.
Can you explain briefly, like the push replacement? What does it do? The push replacement, the callback you have in there, navigator dot of context.
I think he's talking about the elevated button below that, Candy.
Oh,
this
that's
this
oh, that's a
is a
separate.
different one. This is a different one. We'll get to this later.
Oh, okay, Sasa.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So maybe we could continue to the next. I don't know if this was like clear enough. However, if any questions arise, maybe we can ask. Yeah. So that was what I understood from the did update widget, and then we move to the next, which is the deactivate widget. So this is called when the widget is removed from the widget tree temporarily. Hey, RL is a bit difficult. Does anyone have an insight on what the deactivate widget is? Isaac?
Seems to be quite unfamiliar life cycle hook to me. I'm actually looking it up as we speak.
Okay.
Yes.
Carl, do you have an insight on it?
I've never used it. I've never had to use it. Though I'm very curious to know what it's about, especially the part where we are saying it's called when the widget is removed from the widget tree temporarily. I'm really curious to know instances where a widget is removed from the widget tree temporarily. Other than that, I've never used it. I don't know much about it other than the fact that it's part of the life cycle.
I know. Does anyone else like have any insight? Because I also don't know like much about it either, and I can't imagine like using this particular state. Or we could say maybe it's open to learning, open to question. And then they say, okay, cool. So maybe we could probably just move to the next, and the change dependency. Okay, which is the dispose. So on this is called when the widget is removed from the widget tree permanently. Anyone who's ever wanted to like remove a widget permanently from the widget tree? Yes, no? Anyone with an experience of that?
I think all of us have done this, even unknowingly. Yeah, it's called every time. I'm familiar with it with respect to when you're now moving from one screen to another, either navigating from a screen to another or popping the screen out of the stack. I'm not sure which it is, but then it pertains to screens, right? So for instance, when you initialize a controller, for instance, you're using a form and you have a bunch of controllers, it's usually best practice to dispose the controller within this particular method. Yeah, I know it from that respect.
Okay, cool. Yes, I think.
If I may add, Candy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so basically what my friend had said, and this thing doesn't display names, so I don't, yeah, definitely what our colleague has said is mostly on most occasions we use it when navigating from one screen to another. It is called every time you navigate from one screen to another, be it popping, be it pushing, but you can actually override it like you've done in your example, in case you need to add any extra logic before the screen moves. I'll still have to go back on the idea I mentioned about lifecycle hooks. So this is like the last hook that is called during your widget life cycle. Once you are removing that widget from the tree, either navigating or something, so the dispose is the last one that is called. And best examples, we use them when we are trying to dispose of some controllers there. So there is need, before you pop the screen, that you dispose any resources that are being used by those animation controllers, and the dispose method is the place to do that. Just adding on what that was Mark had said. Back to you, Ken.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think both of you are correct. Thank you so much for that. So this method is called when the widget is removed from the tree permanently. For example, when you want to call the navigator.push replacement, the dispose of animation controllers or timers or whatever types of widget that you want to remove, or rather that we could dispose. So here we have a controller which we will call. So for example, here we initialized our animation controller. This is what we would wish to dispose. So we have a controller, an animation controller, which we will call for disposing. If not calling it, we could have memory leaks in our application. So I think this is why it's important to dispose, so that we avoid memory leaks. And I think memory leaks also is an interesting topic to dig deep into. So if anyone has an insight of what memory leak is, maybe they could tell us. And then to stimulate a call for the dispose method, we need to add, so this is why you are asking me about this elevated button here. So to stimulate this for the dispose method, we need to add a button which calls the push replacement on the navigator. So on the navigator, and then we are able to push to a new page. So now the animation controller will be disposed. So because now we are literally moving from this page that we are here to. Are you able to view my simulator, by the way?
No, not yet.
No.
Oh my goodness.
You're just sharing your VS Code window.
Sorry, guys. How do you add both of them?
I think there's an option to share more than just a window.
Oh, shifts. I'm pressing shift, it doesn't. Oh, great. And now, is it visible?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, so when you are asking me about the this second elevator button, this is the one that I was saying. So to stimulate them, because we want to dispose the animation controller. So to stimulate this, we call the dispose method, and we add the button, which calls the push replacement. And after that, it calls the push replacement on the navigator, and we now move to a whole new page, which is not this page. So if I would press the dispose button, then it takes us to a new view. And by this new view, this means that we have now disposed the animation controller that we had from the previous view, now to a new view. I think that's ideally what I was trying to explain, and what Isaac was trying to say as well.
Also, it removes the previous page from the stack.
Precisely, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions? Comments?
Oh, I do have one.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to the dispose method as well, aside from no, rather like in addition to what Isaac and the rest have said, whereby you dispose things like controls and the likes. Another way that you can see this in action as well is maybe like assuming you have a list of items. Say you have a list view builder, a list view of items, and then you have this scenario where you want to say remove an item from the list, and now there's a case where you can have your list tile item be a customized widget. I think for those of you who've been able to come across how you extract widgets into smaller files to ensure that the tree doesn't grow too big. So you can extract, say, like a list tile into its own file, no, its own class. Yeah, its own class. And then after extracting the list tile into its own class, you have it as a widget, which will have all those methods attached to it. And so now if you're removing the list item from, say, a list of other items, then for that particular item that you're removing, say by sliding or by popping somewhere, as you're removing it, then the dispose method will be called as well, and you can see it in action via that scenario.
Oh, great. So it's not only like you have, like, if you want to like dispose other things as well, so you can use this particular cycle, right?
Yes, so it will be called by the widget being removed, say, from the list, the list of items. In case you have a widget which has a list of items which is its own widget class.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for that, Mila. Thank you. All right. So, and another thing that I forgot to add is I included like print methods on each of these life cycles so that you're able to like see whenever like you run or you press the buttons, they're able to like let you know that an init state was called, the method ran, or the change dependencies and such stuff. So you're able to like view them. For example, if I do the did update widget, you're able to see your title has changed. So at first we see the init state example, which we wrote here, deactivate example. Yeah, the print example is here. We are able to also view the did change dependencies example and all. And also when we run the dispose method as well, like you're able to like see from the print methods that we initialized. So I would like to know if there are any more questions. If there are no more questions, this code base is open source on the Flutter Kenya GitHub repository. You can actually add what Mila was saying on disposing like the list of items and all, and just play around with it and see what we are talking about. Yeah. If there are no more questions, I would really like to appreciate all of you for coming to this event and sharing your insights. This was really, really great. And I hope you guys are learning also.
Definitely, Candy. Thanks for the talk. Of course, assuming nobody else has a question. So the idea of life cycle hooks is very important, especially for widgets, for us Flutter developers. And especially if you are a web developer, you know how crucial this topic is. So most of us, we tend to just skip some of these basics, run straight to development until we encounter those very wonderful red screens of death from Flutter telling us that parent cannot be null, and we don't know what's that. The only thing it's telling you is that set state was called during build, and you don't know what to do about that. So this is a very good topic to expand on. Of course, telling us when one is supposed to do what. So where you are supposed to put some logic. And of course, it doesn't end here. It also takes a personal effort on your own time. Review Candy's code base, go on your own search, try to research a little bit on these hooks and what should happen when. And I'm sure we'll be all expert Flutter developers. Thanks, Candy.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. And also, these are some of the questions that are asked in interviews. Yeah. So it will be nice to like have more insights on them as well, so you're able to explain things. All right, so if there are no more questions, I would love to end the meeting, and thank you so much for sticking around. See you guys next Wednesday for the next topic. And yeah, also you can also tell us like what topics you'd want us to cover. It's always nice to like learn from each other. Thanks, guys. See you next Wednesday.